Let's bring in our political panel. They've been standing by patiently. We've had a few live events. Labor MP for Chisholm, Carina Garland, and Liberal MP for Menzies, Keith Wallahan. Thanks both for your time. Carina, beginning with you, this attack obviously has shocked a lot in Melbourne. What do you make of the response there? The Jewish community saying not enough has been done, in particular from the state government, but some taking aim at the federal government as well. What would your response be?
We take very seriously, the issue of anti-Semitism. That's why we appointed a special envoy to eliminate, anti-Semitism in our communities. As I mentioned earlier, and as I've mentioned before on this program, there have been attacks in my own electorate. My focus, and indeed the government's focus, is on supporting the Jewish community at a time where we have seen a rise in anti-Semitism, and whether that's being through dialogue with the community, dialogue with the law enforcement authorities, and we heard from the Premier earlier about the actions that the state government's taking and Victoria Police are taking. I think this is going to require a really broad response from, yes, federal, state governments, and in dialogue, close dialogue with the community. It's a horrible problem, and we need to make sure that it's very clear that there is zero tolerance for anti-Semitism in our community, and do all we can collectively to ensure that we don't see it rise any further. And my focus as a local member is on making sure my local community feels safe and supported.
Keith, your response to this incident, but I guess the specifics. If something specifically should have been done by the government and hasn't, what is it?
Well, we'll let the police do that investigation, and if there are gaps in the state government's area of responsibility, they should be held to account for that. But this is a line in the sand. We've got synagogues burning in Melbourne, and I've heard Jewish Australians question whether this is their home anymore. That's a heartbreaking thing to hear. 10% of Jewish Australians served in World War I. Our greatest general was a Jewish Australian. We've got a university, a freeway, an electorate named after him. John Monash was a great Australian. From medicine to business to law, it's not just their home. Our home wouldn't be the same without them. So for them to question that this is where they can feel safe and secure, that should concern every Australian. And we should, from this day forward, take this seriously, enforce the laws that we have. And we heard the passion when the Premier visited. They feel like the laws aren't being enforced. So there's a lot more that we can do now, and there's a lot more leadership that could be shown from the Victorian Premier and our Prime Minister.
Yeah, clearly an escalation in terms of this act. We'll see what the authorities come up with, but there appears to be some CCTV images. Perhaps they can be sort of tracked as to where they go. We'll see how that all plays out. Carina, there's also some criticism on the Albanese government and what's happened at the UN. So now supporting, what is a big shift in policy for the Australian government to actually call on Israel to withdraw from Gaza and the West Bank, noting it withdrew from Gaza in 2005. Obviously, there's an ongoing war at the moment. Why would that call be made now when there are still hostages in Gaza? Shouldn't that be a prerequisite, those hostages return before anything else happens?
Oh, look, we consider very seriously as every resolution before the United Nations. Australia has long held the bipartisan view that there should be a two-state solution in the Middle East. And we supported this resolution because it was felt that through doing so and joining 157 other countries around the world, including the UK and Canada, that we would be advancing the pursuit of peace and the pursuit of a two-state solution in Israel with Palestine.
Okay, and Keith, when the coalition sort of says, Australia should support Israel, is it that black and white an issue? There's been plenty of calls around the world on how far Israel's gone. I mean, one of the issues, they won't even let media into where the war's being fought. Is there still a responsibility on Israel to fight this war and obviously try to get back hostages in the right way?
There's two things I'd say, Tom. The first is that election promises matter. And Anthony Albanese, when he was opposition leader, said there would be no difference between the two major parties on Israel. That's not true. The second is timing. Of course, both parties long-term want a two-state solution, but anything that incentivises a similar attack to the 7th of October is unacceptable. So the timing of this change really matters. We need to make sure that the hostages are returned and that a peace has been negotiated. Then we can turn our mind to what comes next. But to do it now is premature and it incentivises further attacks.
All right, just quickly wanted to talk energy policy to you first of all, Keith. 3 out of 6 of the major wind farms the coalition is now opposing. So we know you're pro-nuclear, but it appears as though you're pretty negative on renewables.
Well, the key thing with any energy source is a social licence. You've got to make sure that there's a social licence from the community, whether that's nuclear or renewables. So we believe in a mix, and we also believe that the communities should be consulted. And you don't want to railroad community interests.
But you're not saying you put them somewhere else.
Here.
They're just being scrapped.
Well, it depends. If there is a social licence for an energy source, then it's good to go. But we don't just railroad communities, whatever the energy source.
Carina, the big promise, Keith mentioned election promises, was $275 your power bills would go down by because of the transition. I know we've got these sort of quarterly handouts, but aside from that, that's clearly not going to happen. Can we just say that now?
Well, look, I think that is, a question that is a bit premature to be asking now, given we know that with more renewables coming into the grid all the time, that we are seeing the cost of energy decrease. I understand people are under pressure with their energy bills. We also need to understand that we didn't really have a clear picture of what our energy makeup and market looked like when we came into government, because there were deliberate attempts by the previous government to withhold information so that it was more difficult for us to make the kinds of assessments around energy prices that we would have wanted to. But we know prices have come down because of the interventions that our government's made, that I will note that the opposition did not support.
It's true, a price hike was held over, but even without that, Labor is not on track for that. But anyway, 6 months to go. Carina, Keith, thank you.